And now, back to the big event of the evening. When we began our year this time, we were unable to identify one person to be the program coordinator for the entire year. So we were a little bit worried, and finally people said, well, the first one that spoke up was Sally Sorrell, and said, I'll be responsible for a couple of programs. And then Chris Warwick said, I'll take two, and others said, volunteered, and the next thing we knew, we had a full calendar of programs for the year. Sally was going to present the program tonight, but Chris ran into a wonderful idea in a presentation, and so Sally has relinquished her month to Chris. And you tell us now, Chris, what it's going to be.
Tonight we got a very special program, very unique program. We've got our very own editor and publisher of the Dahlonega Nugget, Wayne Knuckles, who will be talking about the reprint of the book that was mentioned earlier. Copies will be available for signing and purchase afterward. W.B. Townsend, the first editor and publisher of the Dahlonega Nugget. Wayne's originally a native of the Bluegrass State from Kentucky, and he came to us here a couple years ago from South Carolina, where he had been an editor and publisher of a small newspaper up there called the, what was it? Hampton County Guardian. Is that correct? Yeah, Hampton County Guardian. And he also has a distinction. Some of you might not know this as far as a trivia question, but the Dahlonega Nugget is one of only two newspapers in the United States that has a distinction of having the word or name Nugget in the title. The second one is
the Gnome
Nugget. So another Gold Rush area. They had to steal it from us and it came later. So without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Wayne Knuckles, who's going to entertain us for the next hour.
Well, they say a good thank you all for having me, first of all. It's good to be here. I see so many familiar faces and good friends in the audience and new faces as well. Jared, I was blown away to hear about your film. If there's a way to put that on the Nugget website where everybody can see it at some time, I'd love to talk about that. Congratulations. That's great. But a good newspaper informs and entertains. So I learned something today, I got to tell you, as for information for your purposes. Oh. Well, look who can do it. Well, who could this be?
You didn't know WB was going to be here himself.
I know who's responsible for this one. I like that. That's a good picture. I kind of look like him. Maybe it is older. I brought some pictures of him. Well, you don't need to see that one, but I'll go ahead and pass this one if you just want to pass that around. I don't have a life-size cutout. But the real reason I'm here, and thank you, Sally, for giving up your spot. But I ran into Chris on the street one day, and Chris said, Wayne, you still work at the newspaper, don't you? And I said, Chris, you know I still work at the newspaper. And he said, well, you believe in free speech, don't you? And I said, yes, Chris, I believe strongly in free speech. He said, good. How about coming to the Historical Society and giving a free speech? So thank you, Chris, and thank you, Ann, and thank you, Manny. They auditioned me actually a month ago. I must have passed the audition because I'm here tonight. And I am here to talk about my predecessor and this gentleman to my right, William Benjamin Franklin Townsend, W.B. Townsend. He was born July 12, 1855, and he died in June of 1934. He lived his entire life in the mountains of North Georgia as a native of Dahlonega and Lumpkin County. As a young man, he served as an apprentice printer, learning the trade that earned him fame and fortune for more than 40 years. His biographer, A.F. Dean, who was an Atlanta journalist and a contemporary of Townsend's, said of him, for 43 years, in a dinky one-room shop at the foot of a hill on a side street, Townsend sent his soul out to the world once a week, 52 times a year. Sometimes that soul was black with obscenity. Sometimes it was purity itself with sublime thoughts, and all the time it was against corruption and pretense, the false and the untrue. His wry, cranky, and observant columns were picked up by major newspapers all over America. Townsend wrote that it was delivered, that the Dahlonega Nugget in Townsend's time was delivered to 224 different post offices in the United States and one in the Philippines. Which, as I get into this, is really remarkable because he's an odd and strange man. He's not an educated man. He's very much a self-taught man. He didn't travel very widely. I think the farthest maybe that we can document he went was Blairsville one time for a camp meeting. But in his time, he was known as the Mark Twain of his time for his sayings. And he was a querulous man. He was a mean man many times, mean to his own family, mean to his readers. His readers obviously couldn't get enough of him. This is how Townsend described himself in the pages of the Nugget. He held numerous offices in Lumpkin County. He was elected to just about every office he wanted to be elected to. He apparently did lose one race for mayor of Dahlonega by one vote. And he refers to himself in the third person, but this is how he talked about himself after that race. He says, it may be a little out of order to give a biographical sketch of a defeated candidate, but we can't see that it will hurt anything to make a few remarks about Townsend. And this is Townsend talking about Townsend. About Townsend, who was only one vote behind his opponent for mayor of Dahlonega. Townsend was born in the year 1855 and has been a citizen of the town all his life. Doesn't live in as fine a house as there is in town, but is comfortably located on the edge of Dahlonega, surrounded by a wooden wall, covered sufficiently to keep him from suffering from heat in the summer or cold in the winter, where he can snore without disturbing anybody. Can sing, whistle, dance, play the phonograph, and turn a grindstone all day. Wears knee pants, claw hammer coat, low-cut shoes the year round. Got his primary education at a local institution and went back there to the crank of the press. Is not very handsome. He is not so ugly that he has to run and hide when any visitors visit his shanty. He's not a Christian, but does much good whenever he is a candidate by causing most of the brethren to cling together like pigtail sausage. The first 4-page hand-cranked issue of the Dahlonega Nugget rolled off an old sheet-fed Washington press on March 4th, 1890, under the editing and proprietorship of William G. McAnally and S. H. Williams. And Townsend was there to help produce that very first issue. According to the official Nugget history, which appears on the newspaper website, in 1897, when the Nugget was only 7 years old, McAnally asked Townsend to lease and edit the newspaper for a year. With $2.50 in borrowed money, he leased the printing equipment and started an enterprise that continues to this day. When his lease expired, Townsend purchased the newspaper and he had it out of debt in 2 years. Many years after the fact, Townsend wrote this about the beginnings of the Nugget. The Nugget was established by Mr. W.G. McNeely, now residing somewhere in Georgia. We helped to get out the first issue, together with George Moore, now at Gainesville, then a little boy who was the office printer devil. Later on, the present owner, meaning himself, Townsend, and Mr. McNeely had a quarrel and 2 fights in one day, using as weapons for the occasion a pair of nail grabs and a pistol. And had it not been for Hiram Gully, John Jenkins, Alan Mize, and others, one or both of us might have ascended the golden stairs and been furnishing St. Peter with music. We, meaning Townsend, we took hold of the Nugget, went to work, and had 3 meals a day of good substantial food, and every now and then the wing or gizzard of a chicken. So let us rejoice and be exceedingly glad. William Benjamin Townsend was a man of many talents, but spelling and grammar were not among those. He, as far as anybody's been able to determine, you all know that in his day the typesetting would have been done by hand. And on a small paper like that, I think the linotype was in existence, but he couldn't have afforded that on the small paper. So he had his type cases and his individual letters, periods, commas, A's, large A's, small A's, etc. And to do the Nugget each week, he would physically reach in, get the letter A, put it in what's called a frame, or actually put it in what's called a stick, and then put it in the frame. But he put it in a stick, and he could read, which is a pretty good talent to have. I mean, you're reaching on that. As far as we know, Townsend is the only person that's ever been documented who composed while he's doing that. He wrote his column while he's thinking of what he's going to write while he's picking out letters. So it's just unheard of. Most people would at least handwrite it out. Maybe, I don't know if the typewriter's around then or not. And then they would set it up, and then they'd go start finding the letters. He wrote his column while he's hand-picking the letter. So there's a lot of typing, but he never proofread his stuff. He didn't care. He said, he left them, he shrugged them off. This is what he said one time. This is Townsend. He said, if you see a typographical error in the Nugget, don't stop to criticize the editor. It won't hurt you or do you any harm. On another occasion, he said, everybody who can read it all can understand what they see in the Nugget. We don't use no highfalutinary words. Don't know them. If we did, we wouldn't use them. Deb Smith, that we'll talk about in a minute, and I'm glad to hear that she's been nominated for an honor because she deserves it. In the 2011 edition of the book that I'm going to talk about today, said this about Townsend. In honor of Townsend's unique style, I had left his words alone. When you see a misspelling, pause a moment and imagine its beginnings. Close your eyes and listen for the woody clack of metal type on a composing stick. Imagine the aroma of ink, the fire scent of a pot-bellied stove in the drafty Nugget office, the soft, dim light of a small electric bulb in the wee hours of the morning, and the low chortle of a small-town editor who became known and beloved as a modern Mark Twain to thousands of newspaper readers across the country, as he put his words together not perfectly, but with unforgettable effect. Here are some examples of what she's talking about. These are some W.B. Townsendisms. While some newspapers are like a balloon, large and full of gas, the Nugget is small and contains nothing but the cream of the news. The Nugget uses no varnish with its locals, but calls things by their proper names so that they may all be understood. The American and Journal of New York will erect a 20-story building. This is only 19 stories higher than the Nugget office. The paperman made a mistake and sent us the wrong size, causing the columns of the Nugget to be small. It may look like a chicken with a few feathers, but the meat is nice, delicious, and plenty of it. Biographer Dean, who knew Townsend in his time, said this about W.B. He said, when Townsend chose the wrong letter, misspelled through ignorance, committed mayhem on the English language, was crude, coarse, and mean, it appears, as in the first edition of Observations of Peak and Lumpkin, as it was written. No near lifelike picture of the man who spread his fame throughout the nation could be given unless he was presented exactly as he lived and wrote. Of course, errors both in composition and grammar appear because the man considered it a waste of time to proofread. He didn't even have a grammar school education. Later on, A.F. Dean wrote in the same book, the Nugget in W.B. Townsend's time, never more than 4 pages. Just 4-page sheet, hand set on an old Washington press. Advertising rate was 15 cents per column each. Margot, I think it's gone up a little bit since Mr. Townsend's time. The front page, Mr. A.F. Dean says, was the least important part of it. It contained a lot of advertising. Oftentimes, or sometimes at least, the advertising would be inserted upside down in the paper. It made no difference to Townsend. He never read his proof. He said it was understood just the same, if it was upside down or right side up. There's a famous, some of y'all may have heard or be familiar with, I just don't have a lot of details on, but the only libel suit, which is amazing if you, some of the things that he had written in his life, was filed by Mr. John Moore, direct descendant of the Morrison Moore Parkway folks. And he sued Mr. Townsend for libel, $25,000 libel suit. And I would love to see the transcripts, if they ever exist, of what that trial was, because the contemporary accounts were that the courthouse, the Gold Museum, the courthouse at the time, folks came from near and far to hear this trial. They wanted to hear Townsend on the stand and and evidently tore up the Gainesville lawyers that they hired to persecute him. And they ended up settling the suit out of court for $100 at the end. Townsend was unrepentant to the end, kept writing, never mentioned it again. Now, when I say he was mean. He really was. He just didn't care what he wrote. This is some of the meaner things he would say. and he named names. Arthur Halsey is said to be a regular man-eater. He's been making a little Mountain Dew for medicinal purposes, and someone removed a keg of the Overjoyful without his permission. He suspected Everett Sullins of knowing all about it, and presenting a gun to Sullins' face told him to tell where it was or he would kill him. Everett wasn't long in taking in the situation and belched up enough information concerning it to save his life. This is another item for this fellow. A few days ago, Mrs. Woody, a white lady of Auraria district, swore out a warrant for Charlie Davis, the little 15-year-old son of Will Davis, charging him with assault with intent to rape. It said that Mrs. Woody is large and stout, weighing about 160 pounds. Plenty big enough to throw Charlie across her lap and spank him until his nose bleeds. He didn't really try to be impartial. I think he doubted it. Recently, H.E. Watson of Dahlonega refused to take his nugget out of the post office because we gave an account of his being locked up in the calaboose. It's such a rare occurrence to see a member of the church en route to the calaboose in a dog cart, tail end foremost, so drunk he could hardly hold his head up that we couldn't hardly help but give the occasion special mention. Can you imagine? A decent-looking man making an ass out of himself in such a manner has no right to get mad at anyone except himself. However, the Nugget will not have to suspend publication. The extra copies of the Nugget last week sold like hotcakes. We, meaning again Townsend, we judge it was on account of the editor's picture. It pleased our many friends, and if our few enemies have slept with a copy of this issue under their heads for a few nights, it would have softened their hearts, regulated their bowels, and kept them from suffering cold feet in the winter. The man absolutely played no favorites. He wrote about his own family, and I had heard this and just recently found this particular citation about his own family. And he's writing, he says, Liza, one of our daughters, stepped off from home Sunday night and married Bill Adams. It would have been best if she had cut her own throat, because Bill has a wife and 3 children residing elsewhere. Reverend Forrest officiated. We feel confident there is a reserved place in hell for people that make such matches, knowing the facts, and a good chance for a preacher who would marry such folks of meeting their just reward too. A couple of years later, he wrote, on Saturday last, Billy Adams and his wife, which is W.B.'s daughter, waylaid the public road where this sorry piece of humanity stood and cursed while his wife knocked down and beat her sister Emma. He is a son-in-law of ours, but if the Lord had anything to do with making him, he must have made a mistake and thought he was breathing life into a dog. He is too lazy to work. He lays around and waits for his wife to get what she can procure on credit. There are lots of people who have sorry kinfolk, but in this instance, if there were prizes offered, we would certainly get the first. Jimmy Anderson told me a story. Jimmy met a contemporary of Townsend's who had been in the Townsend homestead in Townsend's lifetime. And W.B. didn't go home very much. He had the Nugget office at that time was located about where the Smith house is now. And I'll pass this around where y'all can see it. If you see these roofs right here as I pass this around, you'll recognize the college and the steeple up here. But one room is where he slept, and the other room is where he put the paper together, the Nugget, and that was the original Nugget office. He would walk off. I was getting ahead of myself. I'll tell you that part in a minute. But anyway, Jimmy said this guy had gone to Sunday dinner at W.B. Townsend's house, and W.B. just would not speak to this Billy guy at all, even though they're at the same table, 8 people at the table. He'd say something like, Sarah, would you ask Billy to pass me the salt? And Billy's sitting right here. You know, he was also a bit of an entrepreneur, I found out recently. I didn't know this. In addition to selling the Nugget, he just sold all kinds of stuff. some of the things he wrote about in his column. He said, "We received 6,000 frost-proof cabbage plants at this office from South Carolina for sale. Single 100 for 25 cents cheaper in larger lots. Come and look at that sewing machine we have for sale at this office. We have a few of those cat's paw rubber heels for sale at this office. Come around and see that fine Webster's Dictionary we have for sale at this office." He wrote this: "When W.B. Townsend asked those owing him notes to come down and pay, did they think he was joking about it? If so, they are mistaken." He held so many offices in his lifetime, just about anything he wanted to run for. And maybe it was because of campaign promises like this that I found in one of the papers. He said, "If I, W.B. Townsend, is elected ordinary and do not make a good officer, better roads, more county improvements at a less expense than under the present management, with more general satisfaction, I will resign and pay the expenses of another election out of my own pocket and leave Lumpkin County." He never had to do any of those things. He stayed in his little one-room, two-room office of the Nugget most of the day. He'd go home, I think, for dinner. He'd walk home, depending on what he had to eat. He might stay an hour or two. He'd be back at the office. He was in bed at sundown. He was back up at 2 or 3 a.m. And that's when he started composing clack, clack, clack on his stick, firelight. He led a pretty solitary existence. And again, this is my source is Jimmy Anderson. He apparently got upset with his wife, and they were married almost 60 years, so they had a pretty good thing. But he got upset with his wife because he was a man of, and I like all the pictures I see. He's always dapper dressed. He's obviously image conscious. But she got bored because she's sitting around the house all day with nothing to do, and WB's down there doing the newspaper. She's a little ways out in the country out here, and right off Wimpy Mill Road, I think is where they lived at. And she started taking in laundry, and he just had a fit. He just couldn't stand it. He didn't want people to think that he was so poor that his wife had to take in laundry. So that's another. He didn't go home. He just wouldn't go home. I want to tell you a little more about what A.F. Dean said about Mr. Townsend, too. And I keep citing him. I'm going to tell you that he wrote the original version of the book, Observations from People in Lumpkin. He was a contemporary of Townsend. Bit of a rival as far as he worked at the Atlanta paper, the Gainesville paper, knew Townsend personally. So through his writings, we have the best knowledge of Editor Townsend that we do, that exists, really. A.F. Dean said the editor believed in telling the names, and he deleted no names. He softened no crimes. Although his little 4-page weekly was published 20 miles from a railroad, its incisive paragraphs were reprinted everywhere. For years, the Atlanta Journal published a column called Observations from a Peak in Lumpkin. The Columbus Inquirer-Sun likewise reprinted Mr. Townsend's columns. New York dailies ran stories about the editor and his paper, and the American Mercury, from the pinnacle of its sophistication, found the Dahlonega Nugget a rich source. And let me tell you that one of the editors of the American Mercury during this time was a fellow by the name of H.L. Mencken, who gained some reputation of his own. He was picking up Townsend stuff and running it. He just thought it was that good. A.F. Dean paints this picture of Townsend, seated high on a stool before his type case, his shoulders bent. On his nose, a pair of silver-rimmed spectacles, which cost 50 cents. The editor deftly composed his sage observations and fixed them in the reality of type. I want to share with you a picture from the original book that really I had not seen until I got a copy of the original book. This is Townsend near the end of his life. And that's what A.F. Dean's writing about, seated on his high stool, picking through his type case, wearing the old editor's eye shade. Do you know why the editor wore those? The fancy ones were green. His is made like out of a piece of leather, it looks like. But they were often had a naked bulb illuminating, and they just needed to block some of the glare out. So that's what the green eye shades were back then. When he died, when Mr. Townsend passed away, his obituary was published not only in the newspaper across the country, it was published in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. This is what they wrote. They wrote a quite extensive obituary. I'll share a little bit with you of that. Although Dahlonega has a population of little in excess of 1,000 souls, the Nugget has approximately 2,000 subscribers. How many other newspapers have a circulation twice the population of the home city? Half his papers were going out of state to people if they wanted to get it. And by the way, he probably could have sold 5,000 papers. He could have sold, who knows, he could have sold a lot more than 2. He cut it off at 2 because he said, that's a lot of work, I ain't going to do no more. And so it was honestly like when George is really good, getting Georgia football tickets. You just about, somebody had to die and you had to inherit their tickets. To get a copy of the Nugget, it was an honor. It was, people were on a waiting list to get this thing. It was incredible. They took it to California and Maryland, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Ontario, Alabama, all those states. Subscribers chuckled over the sayings in the Dahlonega Nugget. But the editor was not a prophet without honor in his own country. In his more than 40 years as editor, he held virtually every office in Lumpkin County. Mr. Townsend served as town constable, justice of the peace, city marshal, tax collector, mayor, and ordinary. Dahlonega came to look upon the election of its editor almost as a matter of fact. The only question was, which office did he care to be elected to? Financially, this country editor was extremely successful. I don't have to work, he replied once to an interviewer, but I think I would go crazy if I didn't have something to do. The Nugget made money, he admitted, and other business interests proved profitable. He was the director of one of Dahlonega's banks and the principal stockholder. Yet Mr. Townsend had his peculiarities. One of them was the habit of sleeping in his trousers when the weather was chilly. He made no secret about this peculiarity. One day he casually remarked in print, "When retiring last night, it was still warm enough for us to pull off our breeches, as is our custom on a warm night." Twice a day, Mr. Townsend walked from his office to his family's home for meals. At 11:30 a.m., he set out for dinner. If he had cornbread and fried pumpkin, he explained to his readers, he returned to his office at 12:30 o'clock. But if he partook of fried chicken or sliced potato pie, he was not expected back in his office until 1 p.m. Mr. Townsend was not joking either. His habits were as regular as clockwork. In the late afternoon, he made another trip home for supper, returning to his office with his breakfast in a basket. Breakfast for him he was in bed at sundown. Breakfast came at 2 a.m. when he began his day's labors. The mountain editor had a peculiar way of living, and just as peculiar a way of writing and getting out a newspaper. But apparently his way of living was just as successful as his newspaper. Both made him respected in his community and made him famous in cities he had never seen. His obituary was noted among the famous people passing in the New York Times, and this is what the New York Times said upon passing of W.B. Townsend. W.B. Townsend, who never wrote a line of copy with a pencil, pen, or typewriter, but edited and published a newspaper single-handed for more than 40 years, died yesterday in the print shop of his Dahlonega Nugget. The 78-year-old survivor of a past era of personal journalism sat down to rest on a chair beside his ancient printer's stone, where he had set millions of lines of type, composing as he picked out the letters, and a little handheld press where he turned out the papers. He didn't get up. "Ye editor is sick," was the last news story he ever wrote. That single line was the last item in a column of local news in that week's Nugget. A printer's devil here, in the days when Dahlonega was a booming gold town with government mint, Mr. Townsend wanted to be a publisher. He had little education and money, but he set himself up, and for nearly half a century, the Nugget appeared weekly. The pungent comments by W.B. Townsend, editor and proprietor, which is what each issue of the Nugget carried, came to be widely quoted in other publications. It was quite an honor in that time to have your obituary published in the New York Times. Just a little bit more from the Atlanta Journal obituary. They said, the office is just around the corner from the courthouse. At the foot of a steep hill is a one-story, one-room building. That's in the photo. Next to the building is a tiny shack. In the shack is a bed. Mr. Townsend retires shortly after sundown. At 2 a.m., he rises and goes to work. The work itself fixed his hours for him, he claimed. He had to get up early in the morning to make a fire in the stove and heat the type. Can't work with cold type, you know, he said. And in the early morning hours, he claimed, he found it much easier to think and work. Everything the man proposed was setting type by hand without the formality of writing. He had set type so many years while standing in the same spot, he had worn a hole in the floor. He was a man of strong opinions. At one point, there was a campaign to put sidewalks, pave some sidewalks into London, pave sidewalks to people wouldn't have to walk in the mud. He didn't believe that. Didn't believe that's good use of taxpayer money to build sidewalks. He editorialized or remonstrated against that, but it didn't do any good. The city went ahead and built their sidewalk, which was fine with WP, but they say, for the rest of his life, refused. He'd walk out in the mud. He wouldn't walk on the sidewalk. he believed in the courage of his convictions, and what he was doing was right. Another time, there was a project to build a reservoir, and it so happened there was a cemetery on the watershed where this reservoir was feeding off of it. He just thought that would be a terrible, awful thing. He referred to the water that would be in this reservoir as eyeball juice. Said he wasn't drinking. Urged all his neighbors not to drink it either. He was a very unique and unusual man. He even looks, I think, unique and unusual. When he died, after he died in 1936, as I was saying earlier, the fellow from Atlanta, A.F. Dean, came up, went through all Townsend's files, found his columns, culled what he thought were the best of them, added his own comments because he knew Townsend. And he produced this book, and the name of it's the same as Townsend's column, Observations from a Peak in Lumpkin County. And as you can see, and this is an original version, I really shouldn't be carrying it around, but I like to show people how we got to where we are now. It's fallen apart, and there aren't very many of them left. I don't know. I think the library has copies. There may be a few floating around. Not very accessible, so a lot of people haven't heard of Townsend. It's been gone a long time. Fast forward to 2010, 11. I'm sitting in the Nugget office at the 8th or 9th, 10th generation removed from W.B. Townsend as editor, and I get a call. A lady by the name of Deborah Smith. Deborah Smith's a publisher, author. Apparently she lives in Lumpkin County. Never met the lady. I just got a call from her one day, and she said, I want to help the library, Mr. Knuckles. I want to make W.B. Townsend's book accessible to more people, and I would like to use my company to we can scan the original book in and reprint it, and just want to know if your newspaper would have any objections or copyright issues with us doing that. And I said, no, of course not. That's great. I'm glad you're helping the library. We support the library also. I think it's a great project. You have my blessing. She said, good. Would you write the foreword to it? And I did. And so that's how the current version of the book, which was published in 1936, came to be. She designed the cover. I don't know if you can see it where you're standing, but she's got a picture of Townsend in his later years. She says he was a legendary newspaper man in a time of hard type. And so she's got him with his beloved mountains. He writes very much about the mountains in Lumpkin County. Hardly left Lumpkin County, really. And then on the back, if you look how she did that, she's got some type down here and some more flower. I think she did a super job. She did. She did all the work on it. Deb's very busy, and I don't think she likes to publish it. So I get to go out and take credit for all her work and talk to folks about it, but she's the one that did every bit of the work. Jim was asking about where the book's available. It's available at the library. It's available at the Nugget office. I brought some copies with me today. If anybody would like one, they're $14.95. It's 100% to the library. There's nothing, it's just all for the library. God knows our library do so much. Y'all historical people know that as well as anybody. God bless them. And I think it's criminal that they don't receive more funding and more support than what they get. So, I think you'd enjoy the book, and it's a worthy cause too. So, be happy to answer any questions if I can. If anybody has any. Yeah, man.
I'd like to mention that the book is also available on Amazon.com, which you can go and buy directly, and they'll ship it to you. And I'll have that link available on the page about your talk.
Great. Thank you.
Well, I have something to say. The Historical Society is giving a nugget.
Oh, wow.
So you can have it in the office, just a reminder.
I'm going to take is it the Nuggets or mine? I was going to
I was going to be very careful about that. I think it was for a nugget, because you did such a good job, we're getting it to the nugget.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We thank Paul Sheemer for
And it folds up in there.
making that possible.
I'll show you how to do it. Isn't that cool, though?
Yeah.
He was diminutive in size. I figure between 5'6" and 5'8" maybe. And of course, he's not standing on the ground. But I used this measure of that to correlate how tall he was. This came from the archive, Georgia Archive, and that's how I got that shot. It's an excellent shot.
Thank you.
You did an excellent job.
Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you. Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you. Will you sign the book?
Sure will.
Thank you, Wayne, for a most entertaining program tonight. We enjoyed it tremendously. You'll be up here at the front with copies of observations from a peak in Lumpkin.